Hi everyone, welcome back to Nasidyanka. So this is the channel where I talk about Bulgarian history, customs, traditions, and faith, which of course for us includes the Orthodox Church because we are a country with special connection and history related to the Orthodox Church. So in part one, I started speaking about Velikden, which is our great day, which is our Pascha. And for those who live in the West, you will recognize this as Easter. So I mentioned a little bit about the meaning of Lazarus Day and the meaning of Pascha in the Orthodox Christian tradition. And then I started talking to you about Bulgarian customs and traditions on the days prior to Pascha. So this is a continuation where I would like to complete this talk because it's fun and sweet and interesting. So I started talking to you guys about the so-called Buenets or Buenic, Lazarus Bride and Kumichene in part 1 of episode 14. So the Buenic ritual dance or Buenic dance actually refers to girls who do Lazaruvane. If you guys remember in my previous part, I spoke about the little Lazarus Day and the big Lazarus Day. And I mentioned that little girls 5 to 6 years old or 10 to 12 years old will typically sing and dance on little Lazarus Day. Separately from them, though, the older girls transitioning into womanhood will engage in different dances and songs as well as games on big Lazarus Day, which is the actual Orthodox Christian Lazarus Day. So while the Lazar girls sing in the courtyard or in the backyard, because traditionally every Bulgarian house has a beautiful backyard full of fruits and veggies and flowers, and that's just what our houses look like there in the villages. So when I mention courtyard, I'm actually speaking of like a backyard, a beautiful garden of, again, fruits and veggies and grapes and flowers and so forth. So traditionally, those Lazarus girls will sing in that yard, and they divide into two groups of girls. They also perform their traditional dance that's called Buenic dance. They weave large white Lazarus towels or they wave them, the towels. So they dance and they wave those towels symbolically. And the towels can be big handkerchiefs, basically, and they carry them and wave them in front of them. Maybe I should make a side note here because you might wonder what on earth, why handkerchiefs, why towels? Bulgaria is very, again, old country. We all like ancient civilization. Bulgarians have survived and always lived off of agriculture, the land, the animals. And so if you imagine in every traditional home where there is cooking and activity going on, you'll need a handkerchief, you'll need a towel. And since everything is and has been, traditionally hand woven, handmade, it simply represents, it's a symbol of purity, cleanliness. I mean, we want to keep things clean in the kitchen. It's handy, we need it, whether we are giving somebody pita bread or we're giving them eggs or whatever it is, some kind of food. We want to wrap it up neatly into this towel. And so we use that in the dances because our dances represent the dynamics of everyday life. So in the dances, you'll see motions with the hands, certain movements that communicate in silent language whatever is going on for that period of time. So hence those girls are using the handkerchiefs and the towels here that I would not imagine a paper towel that we are most familiar in the Western world. But in this case, they're very finely woven by hand, made from cotton or linen, and finely embroidered by hand towels. So the landlady may at that point tease those girls by encouraging them to jump high and tap their feet loudly so that the crops, of course she's joking here, so that the crops will grow tall and the domestic animals will be healthy and fertile throughout the year. These are just some Bulgarian games, again, and traditions that are included into this whole performance. So as this is an all-girls celebration, all-women celebration, the girls will engage in another game that's called a Lazarus Bride. So in Eastern Bulgaria, and you guys might notice this, Bulgarian regions have so much diversity with regards to songs, traditions, also dialect, speech, language, that I am always blown and amazed. It's tremendous richness of diversity. So in Eastern Bulgaria, the Lazarus girls choose a boynik and a Lazarus bride. Okay, what's that? So the boynik is actually the girl who plays to be agile and brave, and she dresses up in men's clothes. This is just a game, right? She puts on a cap on her head, and in her hand she'll hold a staff or an axe. She basically symbolically is playing the role of a groom or the son-in-law. At the same time, another girl, maybe a younger girl, who is living with her living parents, will then perform the role of the Lazarus bride, whose head is covered with white or red veil, which we call bul. Now, many people, and that's my side note here, many people have expressed that they associate veils with negativity, like women having no rights, patriarchal supremacy. That is very different in Bulgaria, extremely different, you guys. Bulgarians have been always working and elevated equal to men. This is our tradition, not just in modern day time, but ancient times, as far as thousands of years ago. The veil is more of a mystic element, as well as an element of beauty. And yes, I am proud to wear my veil. I am absolutely happy that I have the freedom nowadays to do so, because for instance, many people who grew up nourished in communism, nourished by the hate of the church, for example, have become very discriminating and very judgmental and very humiliating. And when I was a teenager living in Bulgaria, I was very scared of their comments. I was very embarrassed and intimidated. But times have changed, and I'm glad. Times continue to change, but you know what? I am who I am. That's my tradition. That's my background also. But I also love to dig deep into history and to figure out what the meaning of these things is. And the more I learn about them, the more fascinated I become. So in this way, the Lazarus girls go around the houses, but they are cautious so as to not enter those houses where there has been a recently deceased person. And a full year has not passed since his or her death. This is actually not at all a discrimination, but it is a Bulgarian as well as Orthodox Christian kind of symbol of morality and the sign of respect, to give people enough time to mourn and grieve. Typically people who lose a loved one, they want to stay in silence. But it's also, like I said, it carries a spiritual meaning so that we can give rest, silence to those who are also transitioning, not just the living ones on earth, but we're talking about the departed in spirit. So it involves a lot of spirituality that I've noticed it's been hard for Westerners to comprehend. Nonetheless, I've seen many people open to it and interested, hence I'm sharing more. So let's go to another tradition. So another thing that the Lazarus girls will do is called kumichene. Okay, so usually on what we call Vrobnica, which in English language is Palm Sunday, the last of the Lazarus customs is performed, and it's known as kumichene. This is spelled as Kumichene. Again, I'm transliterating because the word is very complex and it comes from a completely different system of writing in Bulgarian language. So on this Sunday, Palm Sunday, the Lazarus women weave willow wreaths with which they go to the river or to the spring, whatever the water source is available in their region. And those wreaths, by the way, they may be made from willow or flowers. Again, and I should add here that in Bulgaria, Palm Sunday is called Vrobnica or Cvetnica because we don't grow palms. Palms don't grow naturally in Bulgaria due to geographic location. So what instead of that grows is willow trees and flowers. So the churches will use willow branches instead of palm branches, and the girls may weave their wreaths from flowers or willow. So there they arrange the flower wreaths on a stick. So they wear them on their heads, they're singing, they're going towards the river or the water source. And at that point, they'll take them off, put them on a stick, which then they dip into the river or the water again, if that's the sea, if that's another type of water body. I'll use the word river. And so they let the petals float at that point. So the girl whose crown, I mean, this is the symbolizing a crown on the head. In other words, the floral wreath floats first, like ahead of all of the rest of the wreaths or crowns, will become the so-called maid of honor. So all the way until next Pascha, the following year, she will enjoy this special respect. Side note here, you guys can notice how Bulgarians celebrate men and women, but we also celebrate family and children on special separate holidays for each. So earlier for the nativity in winter, I had mentioned in a previous episode discussing this, that men celebrated their day, and that was the nativity, and they sang songs and they went from home to home. Well, this here, Lazarus Day and Palm Sunday, is dedicated to women. So they all have their equal status and like dedicated separate holidays when they can celebrate. So immediately after the election of this maid of honor, queen, so to speak, maid of honor, the Lazarus women will take her to they take her along with traditional songs back to her home, where the table has already been set up, decorated in advance, and so the songs will continue and they'll celebrate there. Until Pascha, the Lazarus girls, we say guveyat na kumitsata. So I have trouble translating this in English. In other words, they remain silent, kind of like they're fasting. But in particular, this is with a focus on silence as an expression of respect. And it is related, kumitsa, kumitsa, these are also the sponsors, godparents. In Bulgaria, those people have great, high elevated status in the family. They become part of the family, and they remain for generations, as in like forever, not just for a lifetime, for generations, forever with those people. So we respect them a lot. So basically, the girls will fast from too much talk. They will they will go into silence out of respect for that figure, that sponsor, that godparent. On Pascha, the girls will visit the female sponsor or the godmother, and basically this is a time where symbolically the godmother kind of like gives kind of like unlocks their speech, gives them again a right to go back to talking, almost like it's considered like a forgiveness. And I know I've spoken in a previous video about forgiveness, as it has been misperceived in many places in the Western world, unfortunately. In Bulgaria, forgiveness is extremely deeply spiritual, rejuvenating, and bright and complex process. It's very important there. So you guys can notice how all of this is extremely symbolic and rich and meaningful, and it is interweaved within the Orthodox Christian tradition as well as the Bulgarian ancient history and what's the word? Traditions, customs, ethnicity also. So Lazarus songs and customs were active in the lives of Bulgarians all the way until the first decade of the 20th century. Nowadays, we definitely notice a severe decline with the introduction of Westernization in Bulgaria. I am not a fan of that because, and I know that I'm including here my personal expression. This is not a part of the article I'm sharing with you here. But as you can see, I have created my channel dedicated to history and, again, tradition, authenticity, and faith, because I do believe in truth, in authenticity. And even though I love innovation, I really don't believe that it should be mixed in with with that which is original. For I mean, it can be, if you innovate something, call it something else, basically. But if we call it with the same old name, but it's innovated and mixed, then it can serve as a deception to people. So I'm going to come back to the article here and continue to share with you guys. What comes next is there is a little discussion on Saint Lazarus. The Orthodox Church celebrates this holiday, and we call it Lazarov Den or Lazarnitsa, in honor of Lazarus, of Saint Lazarus Четверодневny. Traditionally, green willow branches are plucked on Lazarus Day, which will decorate the doors the next day, and it stands for, like I said earlier, we also call this Vrobnitsa, which stands for Flower Day, but it is again referring to Palm Sunday for English-speaking people. According to the New Testament, Lazarus is a disciple of Christ and the brother of Martha and Mary Magdalene, whom Jesus brought out of the grave and brought back into life. So God says, Lazarus, arise, and revives Lazarus, who then comes out of his tomb. According to tradition, Lazarus lived another 30 years and died as a bishop of the city of Kiton on the island of Cyprus. The very name of the saint is a symbol or a reminder of health. And for us Bulgarians, health really means life. And life, not just on this earth, but life forever, and longevity. It's again, it carries a very special, deep meaning, physically and spiritually. Lazarus Day is celebrated on the 8th day before Pascha, and it always falls on a Saturday. There is such a thing as Lazarus stew in Bulgaria. Memorial rites are also performed on Lazarus Day in Bulgaria. According to folk beliefs in northeastern Bulgaria, again, that's just pertaining to that region, the dead are released from the graves on this day, Palm Sunday, which we call Vrobnitsa again. So Bulgarians prepare the so-called Lazarus stew as an expression of respect for our departed ancestors. On the eve of Lazarus Day, women will go to the cemetery. They will burn incense, Orthodox Christian incense. We don't use other types of incenses for a reason I can mention in different videos. Burn incense and pour wine over the graves of their loved ones, and distribute food for their souls. And this is again a note. This is very specific and related to the Orthodox tradition. It's very, very ancient spiritual practice. We do give food for the souls of the departed. On Lazarus Day, every housewife distributes prosphora in the village to people. And those are the small loaves of leavened bread that are used in the Orthodox Christian liturgy. And so according to the number of the departed loved ones, but always, now that's a superstition, an odd number. I don't care for that number, but typically she will distribute that kind of a number. And as a side note here, it's curious fact that in Bulgaria, we do have as a civil tradition, or like an understanding, a custom goes that if you give somebody flowers, depending on whether it's an odd or an even number, some will stand for the living and the other number will stand for the departed. I grew up being taught that even numbers were for the departed and odd numbers were for the living. But in this article, I read the other way around. So, you know what? I really don't care because it's superstition. I am more of a factual, historic kind of person. Superstitions are just like little funny facts that I look at them in that way, unless they can be proven by factual and again historical data. But I thought I would share this because you might notice if you speak to a Bulgarian or if you go to Bulgaria, giving somebody flowers is another language, basically, a very rich language. So in Bulgaria, belief in the release of the dead also gives rise to the lighting of fire at the graves, which takes place before sunrise on Palm Sunday. So Pascha, the Pascha celebration begins on Lazarus Sunday. I'm sorry, Lazarus Saturday, because it's always on a Saturday, so at the end of that day. During the Holy Orthodox Church on Lazarus Day, the church glorifies Christ as resurrection and life, who even before his sufferings and death, with the resurrection of Lazarus, established the prototype of the universal resurrection of humanity. It was because of the resurrection of Lazarus that Christ was glorified by the people as the long-awaited Messiah, the King of Israel, as a fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies. As the Vespers, which is an Orthodox Christian service, for those of you who might not know, so at the Vesperal service, in the evening before the feast of the Lord's entry into Jerusalem, again Palm Sunday, prophecies about the King Messiah from the Old Testament are read together with the gospel accounts of Christ's entry into Jerusalem, and it's just part of our church tradition. So on this great Orthodox and folk holiday, Bulgarians also celebrate names days. In particular, any name day that sounds like and by meaning relates to the resurrection of Christ and Lazarus will be celebrated. So with this, I will end this episode. I hope that it brought a few smiles and it kind of enlivened you with all of its color and celebratory spirit. I hope the rest of the day goes well for you. If you guys are interested in receiving more information about Bulgarian history and customs and Orthodox tradition, faith tradition, feel free to subscribe. And you're welcome. And if you have any questions and comments, feel free again to add those in the comment area. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and week. Bye-bye.